Hello, I'm Gareth Mitchell, and this is Somewhere on Earth, the global tech podcast. Yes, I'm in London, and speaking of global, we have voices from Ukraine, but they're recorded in Portugal, as you'll hear. Yes, because all our interviews today come from the recent Web Summit. So you heard our special edition last week. I hope you did. The Web Summit, of course, was hosted in the Portuguese capital, Lisbon. Ania was there. And before we hear some of your material from the Web Summit, Ania, you might just want to quickly remind us about what the Web Summit is and what was going on there.
Well, hopefully our subscribers have heard last week's show, which came from Lisbon, where since 2016, tens of thousands of tech startups, investors, entrepreneurs, artists, celebs have gathered to showcase the latest in tech innovation. The first Web Summit was in 2009 in Dublin, and in 2025 the event will be held in February for the first time in Vancouver, and other events next year will also include Rio and Web Summit Doha.
Okay, so we want to get ourselves on the list for those ones as well, don't we?
Oh, I think we do.
We'll find our way in. Great. And yeah, thanks for that reminder. Let's now get on with it. And coming up today, yes, of course, and before we go too far, I should remind you we are on the Evergreen Podcast Network. We're delighted to be here, and we're in very good company on this network because all kinds of interesting and global and unusual and maybe even quirky podcasts are on Evergreen. So if you're enjoying this, then do go and check out the Evergreen Podcast Network. There's a link to it from our website, or if you're good at Google, I'm sure you can find it. And yeah, just check out some of the other titles. As for this show, how Kyiv is a self-styled smart city now, and it needs to be with the threats it faces from Russia's full-scale invasion, with territory taken elsewhere in Ukraine, of course, and endless cyber attacks on the city's infrastructure. And speaking of cyber security, we hear from the president of the Ukraine university that launched just before the war, and we'll find out just how your data can literally get you killed. Yes, it's all right here on the Somewhere on Earth podcast. So Ukraine was on the agenda at the Web Summit and is now fully back on the global news agenda, what with the full-scale Russian invasion having now passed the 1,000-day mark. And Trump's re-election has focused minds as well, what with him claiming that he can end the war within a day. Delegates at the Web Summit heard about Kyiv and how it's increasingly a self-styled smart city through citizen access to digital municipal services, amongst many other things. Now, this advisor that Ania's been speaking to, this is an advisor to the mayor of Kyiv City, is Oleg Polivinko, and he's advisor on digitalization to the mayor. And, well, Ania and Oleg had a little chat, and it was quite a moment because as they sat down, Oleg received an important notification on his phone.
Oleg, we were just starting the interview. I was pressing the record button and your phone suddenly goes off. What message have you got?
We got notification from our Kyiv City app, which called Kyiv Digital, about missile attack started. And this message provides information for our residents that the missile attack started, providing the map of the bomb shelters and asking them go to the bomb shelter because in the nearest time there will be attack.
And this is all part of a much wider scheme, a smart city scheme of getting Kyiv and other cities in Ukraine to be digitalized and allow services really to be at the access of your fingertips.
Yeah, that's how we use digitalization in smart city now. It's not this approach. It's not familiar to all the cities in our country now. So Kyiv, it's leading this role now, starting from 2021. Our journey started from convenient application for our citizens, but after full-scale invasion, it's shifted to safety area. And we included critical notifications and critical instruction what to do in this critical situation for our residents. And that becomes the basement of applications. And above that goes all services what you using in the city. So it's more even ecosystems of the services, because it's about the public transport, it's about parking, it's about electronic democracy services, it's about requests, it's about initiatives of the residents, what you want to change in the city. And additionally, some specific services like, for example, social card for using transportation and parking for free. This is student card for free transportation usage. This is some social benefits. Digital lines for attending Kyiv City Council or receiving documents, what you need. And of course, this is about veterans. So now we are expanding for functionality of the cabinet of veterans, where they receive personalized services.
This is really about building a community, isn't it? And for the management of the city to be able to communicate well with that community, and for those people to be able to access these services that you've mentioned. How important is it in this digital age to be able to do that?
I think it's crucial, because it's not only about the community, it's even more, it's about engagement citizens in decisions. So from one point of view, we had firstly solve the task how to make open data for our residents, when they can see what's happening in the city in real-time mode. That's why, for example, we're providing the air quality monitoring based on the data what city collecting. It's about the radiation level in the city. It's about any event what's happening in the city. We provide this information directly. So in our case, this makes internal feeling of the calm of every resident, because he opened the application and he understands that this is not static data. This is real time, so it's live mode. And in this moment, they can negotiate with this data, and they can initiate some questions like petitions, participating in the pooling, initiate some questions to their deputies based on the data. That's why we engage them in decision process in the city.
And that's really important, isn't it? Because a big issue for many mayors in the world, really, of major cities is misinformation.
Oh, yeah.
And, potentially, if there's a natural disaster or something like that, to being able to communicate the correct information to their residents. How's that helping in Kyiv?
You're totally right. This misinformation now, it's huge problem for each mayor. We was participating on the summit which organized by Bloomberg Philanthropies. It's called City Lab, and they invited more than 300 mayors worldwide. And they make polling on this summit, and they asked mayors, what's the top priority for you, like challenge? What's the main challenge for you now? And they called misinformation on the first place. So they don't have trustable channel to communicate to their residents, because some of them using X platform, some of them using Facebook platform, some of them publishing information on the website and etc. But in this way, they not covering full. There is no full connection between the residents and the mayors. And this we talk not even about manipulation from enemies, because to increase panic, that's what Russia did in the moment of invasion. They pushing different narrative and different message in the social media, and that's hugely increased the panic of the Kyivians in the moment of invasion. And additionally, cyber attack, deep fakes, creating deepfake movies and etc. All of that, it's working around that. When you have your super app and you are the mayor, you can communicate through this channel. This channel is owned by the city, so you are responsible for all information, what publishing there, so people trust there. We organized poll in the Kyiv Digital, and we asked all the time. Every 2 weeks we have different polls, but we ask our citizens about satisfaction, and we receive more than 95% satisfaction rate based on the answers of the citizens. So that shows that people trust in this channel of communication, and that's one of the reasons why we are here. We are sharing this experience on Web Summit with other cities, with startups, that, hey guys, in your city you have to have such tools. And I think that everyone who is listening to your podcast have to think how, for example, I will solve some challenge like flooding in my own city. Do I have trustable channel where I can receive information from my city authority?
That's Oleg Polovinko talking to Ania, and what an illuminating chat that was, and quite a dramatic start to that interview. My goodness, what with that notification on his phone.
It was indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this started as a communications app. It was for their transport systems, just like so many of us use to get around the city. So there's no more waiting at bus stops, really, for buses that never arrive. Now, this is a life-saving tool. I mean, by the time we'd finished the interview, Oleg had received 3 more notifications of attacks that were heading towards the capital city. And we spoke for less than 15 minutes, Gareth.
Wow. It goes to show. So I guess the importance of the app is self-evident in many ways. But can you just break that down for us then? What people like Oleg and his fellow citizens in Kyiv, what they benefit from having this app?
So, I mean, I think the most important aspect of the app is having reliable information in one place. So many communities don't have it in that one place. You have to go to lots of different areas to get all the information from where what day your bins are being collected, if there are train delays, if there are drone attacks, unfortunately, in places like Kyiv. It's especially important at times of national emergency. Now, Oleg talked at length about the misinformation during the Spanish floods in Valencia last month. And one huge issue was the lack of safe and reliable communications and a device, a way of getting that to the residents. So the residents simply didn't know what was happening. They didn't know if it was safe to return home, where they should go when home wasn't safe. And this lack of information costs lives. Now, misinformation also costs lives. So if there is information out there that isn't coming from the official source and is wrong, that is a danger too. This is why a smart city will have communication channels in place that can give out the right information at the right time.
And I suppose being a resilient smart city as well, and that word resilience gets used all the time now, doesn't it? I might say, oh, I'm resilient, whatever. But I suppose my point here being that, you can have all kinds of municipal services and data that work well at the best of times. What would they do, and how will they respond at the worst of times? If you're talking about an attack, for instance, and full-on invasion, as is happening in Ukraine, or indeed something unexpected like those floods in Valencia, I suppose that's the real test of these systems. So that's
it is indeed.
my input.
Yeah, absolutely. The natural disasters especially. And Oleg, travels around the world and meets mayors of other cities. And this is a continual fight, they say, this misinformation and not being able to tell the citizens what is happening.
Now, also at that Web Summit was the president of the university that launched just before the full-scale invasion. This is the SET University, where SET, S-E-T, stands for Science, Entrepreneurship, Technology. The tagline is reinventing higher education in Ukraine to empower future tech innovators. SET University's president is Iryna Volnytska, who told Ania that Ukraine is a country where your personal data can get you killed if it ends up in the wrong hands, and where cyber attacks constantly target the power grid. So cybersecurity, not surprisingly, is a big focus for the university.
Now we realized that we acquired a huge expertise in cybersecurity, and we want to scale it all over the world. So there are 2 main fields that is developing in Ukraine. One is military tech, of course, because Ukraine is a test bed for a lot of projects that we can fast military tech. It's it is all about surviving. And another thing is cybersecurity, because Ukraine is the most attacked country in the world. That's why we have a lot of expertise, and I believe that we are like Ukraine and Israel are two countries that can actually use offense operations. So like literally we have this expertise, and now we realize how vulnerable are small organizations, non-profits, and with this idea to make the digital world for such organization much safer, we also launched a startup, cybersecurity startup at SET University, and now we protect universities and non-profits, not only in Ukraine but all over the world, sharing our expertise acquired during the war.
Tell me more about the type of cybersecurity attacks you have. If you're having, so many, you say you have the most in the world. What are people trying to do? And you've mentioned most vulnerable are the public bodies, the universities, etc. How are they coping with all of this?
It's all types of attacks. Recently we had like a lot of attacks on power stations. So like we didn't have electricity, for example, and we have a lot of attacks on government organizations, which is really easy to explain, but also there are like population is also very vulnerable in Ukraine. So there are also attacks. I wouldn't call it like attacks, but like phishing, things like stealing data. And as a Ukrainian and the person who live in a country at war, I know that sometimes your data can cost you life. And this is like really crucial. That's why we came up with this startup to make it affordable. As majority, like more than 50% of cybersecurity attacks hackers attacks happens on small and medium business. And usually small business, they like do not have any budgets for cybersecurity, and they can't survive this attack. That's why for us it's also a part of our mission.
You said having your data access could cost your life. How? Explain that to me, because I just can't think under what scenario that might happen, but obviously you know.
For example, a lot of people, they still live on occupied territories. And when you live with it, like this territory, you want to go somewhere, like you can't just live. Russians, they will check all your data, they will profile you, like looking for information, etc. The same with, especially if you are somehow you cooperate with government, any government, or if you are connected to anything, it can be really dangerous for you.
When we spoke before, you mentioned that women were particularly taking up the mantle of jobs that men had done before, like it is so often in times of war, and they were really picking up on the technology side, obviously such a huge industry for Ukraine. How's that aspect going at SET University?
We do a lot of programs for women, again, because no choice. Our men are fighting, and recently we launched a program for female startups, and during this 3 years what we saw is that now we have more than 50% of female founders in tech, which is really crazy, but for us only women can travel. I don't know, is it good or bad? I don't know how to solve it, but in Ukraine we literally discriminate the men because they are the ones who can't leave the country or who need to go to fight. But at the same time, there is no easy answer to this, and for us, we try to come up with different ideas, have at least to stimulate what women can do. And the answer is obvious, startups, technology, again, because we do not have people in Ukraine, and that's why there are a lot of programs, not only at SET University, but also in other universities, other companies, to help women to find a job in tech.
We're meeting for the first time, Iryna, even though we've spoken before, here at Web Summit. Why have you come here? Why is it so important for you and SET University to be here?
It can be a long answer because, people are forgetting about the war. And we need to remind them constantly, that the war is still happening in Ukraine, and it is not only about the war. We also have a lot of things in Ukraine. We need to showcase our ecosystem. We need to find investments for our startups. And Ukraine is a super high risk country. Everyone is afraid to invest in Ukraine, and we need to work with this. We need to work with PR. We need to remind about ourselves. We want to show our ecosystem. We want to show our startups. We want to find partners and clients for our outsourcing companies, for example, and again to remind the world about the war, and that we are still need support. We can't fight Russia, North Korea, Iran only with one country. That's what we are doing currently. It's the most important thing to remind about this.
That's Iryna Volnytska. And a lot of what goes on in these interviews, Ania, of course, is what happens off mic, isn't it? When you're sitting down, setting the sound levels, having a little chat before you start recording. So what kind of vibes did you pick up from Iryna?
Well, we spoke to Iryna back in February to mark the 2-year anniversary of Russia invading Ukraine and the outbreak of war. And she was telling me how much has changed since we last spoke then. The rate of cyber attacks being the big change. Ukraine was such a tech service industry pioneer before the war, obviously with so many of those people who were involved in that industry are now fighting at the front line or have left the country. It's now adapting so quickly to the cyber attacks they're facing because it gives them an opportunity to evolve, to change, to pivot, and hopefully bring in money. So they have that experience that many other countries don't when it comes to cybersecurity. And Set University is supporting these tech startups in this field because they know it can bring so much investment into the country. But the flip side of that is, because unfortunately Ukraine is now so experiencing in being cyber attacked and fighting that off, other countries can benefit from that expertise and first-hand experience. And history has shown, time and time again, that these huge advances often happen during wartime. You think of medical technologies, engineering achievements, but we're now really seeing this with technology innovation in Ukraine.
All right, Ania, thank you for that, and for that brilliant coverage from the Web Summit. And I know you had an amazing time there. It was brilliant to hear Angelica on the podcast as well with you in the last edition. I say last week, but I guess people listen to podcasts in all different kinds of orders and at different times. But anyway, it was recorded last week. So, Ania, should we move on to a little bit of what we like to call listener engagement?
Ooh, yes, please.
Ooh, yeah, we love our listeners. Dear listener, we want to hear a little bit more from you because as 2024 grinds to a halt, as it were, or just gradually fades out, depending on how you think about it, we're looking back on our first full year doing the Somewhere on Earth podcast. And we thought it'd be rather nice to get your input, dear listener, on some of the items that you remember that most stood out for you over the last year. And we thought it'd be fun to jog your memory. So we're just going to play you just 3 clips from stories that we covered during the year. And then we'd love you to get in touch about those clips or just other editions that you heard that really stood out. So let's start that off by going back to the inspirational young Senegalese computing graduate and data science fan whose adventures in science and computing had begun in earnest when her mother told her to get off the games console and actually go out and do something. So we're talking here about Rokhaya Diagne, and she graduated from the Dakar American University of Science and Technology, so she really did get off the sofa and go and do something. She got a degree, then went on to do a whole load of internships. And despite significant political instability in her home country, Rokhaya has gone on to do some really important work using AI to tackle diseases like TB and malaria. So here's a clip from a few months ago where she talks about her work on a platform to use AI to scan microscope slides to detect malaria cases.
So actually what we are providing is a platform that will, where, lab technicians can just go and connect to the platform And then from the microscopic slides that they are having, they could just put it on the microscope that they will connect to the computer. And then from there, they will be able to, the AI model will be able to tell what's on the slide if we have a case of infection and the level of infection and all the information that are necessary. And the use of the platform goes beyond that because it will allow to our governments to have a better tracking of malaria cases in Senegal, because that platform can help our governments have a better understanding and, have maybe in time they can have those results.
Right, so dear listener, you might have remembered that interview with Rokhaya Diagne. Now, another interview that certainly stood out for me was with Timandra Harkness, the author and broadcaster Timandra Harkness, and she'd just written a book, Technology is Not the Problem. And we sat down and I asked her really just what was she tackling in this book? What was the inspiration? What was the background for writing that book?
I want to ask why we have this technology and not other technology, because 10 years ago I would have said we don't really know about this data gathering, and if we knew we wouldn't go along with it. But now I think most people have a pretty good idea that our data is collected and we're profiled, and we have this weird ambivalence, like we find it creepy but we also hate it when it gets it wrong. And so I think actually we kind of like it. So what is it about us that makes this so attractive, this world in which each of us is the centre of our own digital universe, and increasingly like our own universe in the real, the offline world? Because in the offline world as well, things are tailored to us as individuals, although perhaps not that personally. I mean, if we talk about how the technology does it, it doesn't feel as personal as perhaps they'd like it to.
So that's Timandra Harkness. So let's just play you another little clip here from Jimmy Wales this time. Who can forget our interview with Wikipedia co-founder Jimmy Wales? And he came along in a special edition, was answering your questions. And we got into the subject of what Wikipedia is really there for and what kinds of attitudes within the Wikipedia community are welcome and which, frankly, are not.
If you come to Wikipedia with the idea that you're supposed to come and right great wrongs and fight for a particular perspective, and that somehow, as the outcome of all the clashes, the truth will emerge, well, that turns out just to be not true. Like, if people come in and they just want to yell at each other, I mean, go back to Twitter. You're very welcome there. What does work is people coming in who maybe have a different perspective, maybe they have a different background, different sets of knowledge, who approach each other with kindness, assuming good faith, and saying, okay, let's work on this.
Yes, so there we are. Jimmy Wales talking to us there about Wikipedia in his brilliantly, it's very charming and disarming, but quite forthright manner about what goes down and what doesn't go down within the Wikipedia community. So, Ania, let's just kind of bring you in here. It's nice to listen back to those clips, of course, but what matters to you about rounding up the year, listening back, and indeed getting some input from our dear listeners?
So actually, there was even a discussion on our Facebook page asking, are you going to have the studio experts all come in and do a special show and a tech roundup of 2024? Well, this year is going to be a listener roundup of 2024 instead, because we want you lovely, lovely subscribers to tell us what your favourite or even least favourite bits of the show were. And even things we may not have covered, to say, look, why didn't you look at this? A lot of it is time and effort, obviously, on our part. We have, there's only so many of us. But, do tell us what you really, really liked, ideally. And if you didn't like something, do tell us as well. We're not precious.
We're not precious.
Definitely not. And in fact, there have been some listener comments, Gareth. Go on, you say it. You tell us what Floyd thought.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a very long-standing listener from the Digital Planet days as well, Floyd Kennedy, and she's a great mate of ours as well. And when you have friends, of course, a good friend can tell you sometimes what you don't want to hear as well as what you do want to hear. And Floyd responds to a recent-ish interview that we did. A bit like this, he says, I was disappointed with the interview regarding the use of AI. Look, as if AI is just one thing. That seems to be part of the problem, says Floyd. The failure of people involved in promoting, selling and generally disseminating anything to do with it. I'd love to hear an interview with someone like Carl Friston, the neuroscientist who has an excellent grasp on what is actually known about the human brain and how it differs from so-called AI, which will never be able to truly mimic a human brain. He was recently on Neil deGrasse Tyson's podcast, Star Talk. So, well, we'll check out Carl Friston and bear that in mind. Definitely, Floyd, when we talk about AI, as if it is just one generic thing, almost like talking about the internet as if it's a generic thing, when of course it's a network of networks, isn't it? And and previously on this podcast, on other things like Digital Planet that we've worked on, Ania, you remember we've had, even off microphone, behind the scenes, long discussions about whether we can even call this thing called AI. Can we call it AI, or should we more strictly call it machine learning? Or be more specific about what kind of machine learning it is. Are we talking about convolutional neural networks, for instance? There are so many different kinds of ways of and means behind machine learning, and it's a huge, huge topic. And I just think it does us a lot of good when Floyd just says, look, you talk about AI all the time, but just think about what you're going on about here and remember that it isn't just one generic thing. And I think probably behind what Floyd is saying, and it's not intelligent.
No, it certainly isn't.
Just because it's got that I in it for intelligent.
It certainly isn't intelligent, and that is something we will take on board, Floyd. Thank you very much. And just a kind of a quick reminder. So, Somewhere on Earth, the Global Tech Podcast, we have a community on Facebook. Just please find us and join us. We are still on X, Twitter. We just repost there at the moment because we had a big community there from Digital Planet as well. We are on Threads, we are on Insta, we are on YouTube. So please do subscribe to us on YouTube. All the bits are there, and also some shorty nice little bits as well that we've created for you, some nice YouTube shorts. We are, gosh, where else are we? We're on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Did you say TikTok as well? Yeah, LinkedIn, that's an important one.
Oh, we are on TikTok. Yes, we are on TikTok. I know that may sound mad, but we are on TikTok. And I do know that we have one follower who is a teenager. That happens to be my middle one. And she loves it.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Absolutely loves it. So there we go. But she has a private account, so it's not going to go much further than her for obvious reasons. But we are on TikTok, everybody.
And occasionally in Zola's bar in Crystal Palace on a Friday night, in my case. If you're in the area, come along and shout at me about saying AI too much. Let's have a drink. So yeah, in all seriousness, we want to hear from you and just get your input about what we should talk about as the year draws to a close. Just other topics we've done, like in January, we talked about 3D printed human skin. I remember that one. We had that
with Angelica.
Shocking item about the water consumption behind Bitcoin transactions. So each Bitcoin transaction uses the equivalent of like a backyard swimming pool of water.
With the amazing Alex de Vries.
Yeah, that's right. We had Code for America, and they were talking about improving the forms, the way that you interact with government services, and everyone made fun of me for being fascinated by forms.
The best show about forms ever.
I think if I'd have to a pick of the year, I think it would be that one. Everyone goes, it was so boring.
Amanda and
talking about forms.
Wow.
But it's the way that, anyway, I've ranted on about why I think it matters, and that one sticks out. So, oh my God, we just done so much stuff. Dame Stephanie Steve Shirley, for goodness sake, Anya.
I know.
Created one of the UK's first IT outsourcing companies, employing women back in 1962, years ahead of its time.
And she also is a philanthropist, and her money has created the Oxford Internet Institute. And we've had Professor Andrew Przybylski on from there, talking about that amazing study looking at gaming being good for your health. I mean, in Japan during COVID,
goodness,
everything interlinks.
It really does. Sophie Smith-Gaylor went travelling across Ghana, did a tech tour of that country, came back and told us all about it, brought us back some lovely audio. But Professor Viviana Betty was talking about, remember those robotic tweezers? And this whole idea of just creating devices that really do, so robotic devices, bionic devices, whatever you want to call them, but just feel much more intuitive, natural parts of your body. And, we've done a lot.
That was a great programme with Ghislaine Boddington.
Yeah, that was
really good. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah. So there we are. We've given you plenty to think back on. So what did we do well? What could we do better? And that'll be it, won't it, for this edition?
It will be. And please do, the numbers are on the website as well. Give us a little voice memo. If you want to cut us a little clip, if there's something specifically you want us to play, that would be phenomenal. Yeah,
that'd be nice. WhatsApp, by the way, we're on code 44 for the UK, 7486 329 484. 7486 329 484. And good old email, hello. I'm not just saying hello. Hello is our email address at somewhereonearth.co. But having said hello, I'm now going to say goodbye and check out the other shows on the Evergreen Podcast Network, won't you? We'd like that, and so would they. Cheers, Anya.
All right, take care.
Till next time.
Talk to you soon, Gareth.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. It's Michael Calore, Director of Consumer Tech and Culture at Wired, here with my colleagues, senior writer Lauren Good.
Hello.
And Wired contributor Zoe Schiffer.
Hey, everyone.
We're here to tell you about our new podcast, Uncanny Valley, a show about the people, power, and influence of Silicon Valley.
Every week, we get together to talk about how technology and culture from the Valley is influencing our everyday lives.
We dig into questions like, will we ever get our privacy back? Is OpenAI for real? And how are Silicon Valley billionaires impacting U.S. elections?
The first episode of Uncanny Valley comes out on October 31st. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.